Europe is restless. Kings argue, knights roam without purpose, and the church searches for a cause powerful enough to unite a fractured continent. Then, one speech changes. Pope Urban II stands before a crowd in Clermont, his voice sharp, urgent, almost prophetic, and he speaks of Jerusalem, a sacred city, defiled, according to him, a holy land, suffering under foreign rule. His words cut deep, not only into faith, but into ambition, desperation, and hunger for meaning. God wills it, the crowd roars, and in that moment, belief transforms into movement. What begins as a call to defend pilgrims becomes something far greater and far darker. Across Europe, men sell their land, abandon families, and stitch crosses onto their clothes. Some seek salvation, others wealth, others simply escape. Few understand where this road will truly lead. As the armies march east, the world they move toward is not weak, not empty, and not unprepared. The Islamic world they approach is divided. Yes, but it is also ancient, sophisticated, and deeply rooted in its own faith and empires. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo are centers of learning, power, and culture, far removed from the chaos of medieval Europe. Yet division is the silent enemy. Seljuks, Fatimids, local emirs, rivalries weaken coordination, and the approaching storm is underestimated. When the Crusaders arrive in Anatolia, brutality reveals itself immediately. Cities fall, populations are slaughtered, and fear spreads faster than armies. The march toward Jerusalem becomes a trail of blood, fueled by fanaticism and survival. In 1099, the impossible happens. Jerusalem falls. What follows shocks even the chroniclers of the age. Streets run red. Civilians, Muslim and Jewish alike, are massacred without mercy. For the Crusaders, this is victory blessed by God. For the Islamic world, it is a wound carved into memory. But history never pauses. The Crusader states are born, fragile kingdoms carved into hostile land, surrounded by enemies who are watching, learning, and waiting. The war of empires has begun, not as a single clash, but as a long, grinding struggle of faith, power, and identity. And while Europe celebrates, the Muslim world begins to awaken. Slowly, deliberately, a response is forming. As decades pass, the Crusades lose their original clarity. What began as a religious mission mutates into political opportunism. Crusaders fight crusaders. Christian armies sack Christian cities. The Fourth Crusade never reaches Jerusalem at all. Instead, in 124, they turn on Constantinople, the greatest Christian city in the world. Churches are looted, civilians butchered, and an empire shattered, not by Muslims, but by fellow Christians. The damage is irreversible. Byzantium, once a buffer between East and West, is crippled. Meanwhile, the Islamic world watches, adapts, and survives. New powers rise. The Ayyubids fade, replaced by the Mamluks, former slave soldiers turned elite rulers. Hardened by constant warfare, they understand the Crusaders better than the Crusaders understand themselves. Acre, the last major Crusader stronghold, falls in 1291. No grand speeches, no miracles, just the end. 2 centuries of warfare leave scars on every side. Cities are destroyed, populations displaced, and trust poisoned for generations. Yet the Crusades fail in their ultimate goal. The Holy Land remains outside European control. Instead, Europe gains something unexpected: exposure. Contact with the Islamic world brings knowledge, science, medicine, philosophy. Trade routes expand, ideas flow. The Renaissance will later owe more to these exchanges than many will admit. For the Islamic world, the Crusades reinforce a lesson written in blood. Division invites invasion. Unity ensures survival. The War of Empires was never only about Jerusalem. It was about who defines history, whose faith commands loyalty, and whose systems endure pressure. In the end, swords decide battles, but structure decides outcomes. Empires that adapt survive, those that fracture fall. The Crusades fade into memory, but their echoes shape relations between civilizations for centuries. Suspicion, myth, trauma, pride, all forged in this age of holy war. And as history turns its page, one truth remains undeniable: the Crusades did not create heroes or villains alone. They revealed the cost of absolutism and the danger of believing God marches exclusively on one side. Shock turns into resolve. Across the Islamic world, the fall of Jerusalem is no longer seen as a distant tragedy, but as a personal humiliation. Scholars speak, poets write, and preachers remind the people of what has been lost. Yet unity does not come easily. Local rulers still prioritize their own power, their own cities, their own survival. It takes time for a leader to emerge, someone capable of turning outrage into action. That figure arrives in the form of Imad ad-Din Zanghi. Ruthless, disciplined, and strategic, Zanghi understands one truth the Crusaders ignore: permanence requires unity. When he captures Edessa in 1144, it sends shockwaves across both worlds. For the first time, a Crusader state collapses. Europe responds with the Second Crusade, but arrogance replaces preparation. Kings march east expecting glory, only to face disaster. The crusade fails badly, and the myth of Crusader invincibility cracks. From Zanghi's legacy rises Nur ad-Din, a ruler who understands that victory is not just military but moral. He promotes justice, religious reform, and discipline, transforming jihad from chaos into structure. Under his shadow, a young commander learns the art of patience. His name is Saladin. Unlike his enemies, Saladin does not rely on terror alone. He builds legitimacy, earns loyalty, and slowly unites Egypt and Syria. While Crusader states rot from within, weakened by greed and internal conflict, Saladin waits. Then comes the Crusader army, exhausted and dehydrated, is surrounded. It is not a slaughter driven by rage, but a calculated destruction of military power. The true cross is captured. Jerusalem is exposed. When Saladin enters the city, the world expects revenge. Instead, he offers mercy. Civilians are spared. Holy sites are respected. The contrast is impossible to ignore. Europe is stunned. The Third Crusade follows, led by legends like Richard the Lionheart. Their battles become symbols of chivalry, yet neither side achieves total victory. Jerusalem remains in Muslim hands, and the balance of power has shifted permanently. This is no longer a war of raiders and pilgrims. It is a war of empires, shaped by leadership, ideology, and memory. And while swords clash, something deeper changes. The Islamic world has rediscovered unity through resistance. Europe has learned that faith alone does not guarantee dominance. The Crusades are far from over, but the age of blind expansion is ending. The legacy of the Crusades is not written only in ruins and chronicles, but in perception. Long after the last Crusader ship leaves the Levant, the memory remains alive in language, identity, and politics. In Europe, the Crusades are romanticized, transformed into tales of noble knights and sacred duty. In the Islamic world, they are remembered as invasions, marked by massacre and resistance. Two narratives, born from the same events, moving in opposite directions, yet beyond ideology lies reality. The Crusades exposed weaknesses on all sides. Europe learned the limits of fanatic unity, while Islamic empires learned the danger of internal division. Leaders like Saladin became symbols not just of victory, but of figures like Richard became legends not for conquest, but for mutual respect in war. These complexities are often ignored, replaced by simplified moods. But history is never. The Crusades were not a single war, but a series of evolving conflicts, shaped by economics, politics, faith, and human ambition. They accelerated the decline of Byzantium, strengthened Islamic military organization, and indirectly fueled Europe's intellectual awakening. Empires collided, not just with steel, but with ideas, and in that collision, the medieval world was reshaped. When we look back, we do not see a clear winner. We see survival, adaptation, transformation. The War of Empires did not end with a treaty. It dissolved into history, leaving behind lessons written in fire, lessons about unity and fragmentation, about belief and manipulation, about how easily sacred causes can be twisted into engines of destruction. The Crusades remind us that history is not driven by righteousness alone, but by structure, leadership, and timing. And in every age, new empires rise, believing they are chosen. History waits patiently to test that belief.